you guys know how this goes. Trump cannot help himself. He's been on a... Even though... Look, he's been largely quiet since Biden's debate implosion, which is smart strategy for him, right? To stay quiet. Just like let your opponent destroy themselves and you sit back, sip a mojito, maybe go play golf 17 times, which he did since then. By the way, did you know Trump literally drives onto the green and tee boxes? Did you know that? Anybody who's a golfer or even remotely familiar with golf, you would know that is absolute psychopath, sociopath, serial killer activities there. Driving on the green? Like, the extent of your narcissism and selfishness and insanity in that scenario is off the fucking charts. Anyway, I digress. I'm going on a side tangent here, but... So he's stayed relatively quiet, but every now and then he can't help himself. He fires off a tweet on Truth Social and says idiotic things because he's Trump. So this is what he said the other day. Every one of the lawsuits, all caps, by the way, for everybody listening to the audio podcast, not looking at the screen. Every one of the lawsuits I am involved with, including the civil scams, were started by crooked Joe Biden and his fascist government. Hilarious. He's the guy who says, I want to suspend the Constitution, and he's calling others fascist. For purposes of election interference and trying to damage Sleepy Joe's political opponent. The fake news, including Fox, hates to report that because it doesn't play into their narrative. Yeah, I'm sure. Fox is so opposed to you, I'm sure. But the people get it loud and clear. It is this election's form of cheating. They have no shame, but fear not, we will win, and possibly by historic proportions. So let me explain to you what he's saying here. He's saying Joe Biden is responsible for the 17 different kinds of fraud I committed. Don, how is Joe responsible for all the various fraud you committed in the fucking 1990s and 1980s and early 2000s? How would he be responsible for that? He's bringing up the civil cases. That's your weakest point, Don. I mean, I think you can make an argument that, attempting to overthrow the election with the fraudulent elector slates, that's a bigger deal. But the fact of the matter is the courts are gumming up the works to try to protect him come hell or high water on those issues. But they weren't able to do that in the civil cases. So what happened in the civil cases? Well, for one thing, we had the E. Jean Carroll thing, right? He was found liable for sexual assault and then defaming her after the fact, has to pay out $2 quadrillion for that. But in the fraud cases, Jesus Christ, we've gone through the specifics of this case before. There was tax fraud, there was insurance fraud, there was bank fraud, there was all different kinds of fraud. He would tell the most brazen lies of all time. He said his apartment was 36,000 square feet or something like that, and it turned out it was 11,000. He would just tell the most preposterous lies. He would try to, when it came time to pay taxes, he would undervalue his properties massively. And when it came time to get a loan on favorable terms, he would overvalue massively. I mean, this is classic textbook fraud. He's blaming Joe Biden for his decades and decades and decades of scams. That's what he's doing. By the way, how is Joe Biden responsible? Remember Trump University? Remember when he had to pay out millions and millions of dollars because that was a scam? And they used classic tactics like upselling. They shook people down for their money and didn't deliver it all on what they promised. Remember Trump University? And this happened before 2016, right? I mean, the cases were going on then. He ended up settling out of court and paying people a bunch of fucking money to shut the fuck up. How is Joe Biden responsible for that when there were civil lawsuits over that? I have to say this too. I am disgusted with how bad at running the Democrats are. First of all, you shouldn't be able to get through, no matter what kind of Democratic politician you are. If you're in the House, if you're in the Senate, if you're the president, if you're a staffer, nobody should go through a full sentence without saying, this guy's a convicted felon. 88 criminal charges. That's what he has. He committed 4 different kinds of fraud. Every time you open your mouth, you should be talking about a criminal record. Every single time. Every single time you open your mouth, you should be talking about Trump saying, we're going to suspend the Constitution. We're going to terminate the Constitution. Every time. Every single time you should bring these things up. Every time you should bring up, he's the reason Roe versus Wade got overturned. Every time you should bring up, he did the fraudulent elector slates. He knew he didn't win the election. He tried to steal it anyway. Every time you should bring these things up. And they don't. Also, you can bring up his fucking record. Bring up his record. You know what his biggest accomplishment was? Cutting taxes for the rich. You know what he wants to do now? Cut taxes for the rich again. He's not looking out for working people. Hey, we created 800,000 manufacturing jobs. He lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs. Why is it that me, a loudmouth YouTube idiot, can come up with rock-solid talking points to bash this guy over the head with, but when you hear Biden, Trump's a lie, he lies. That's the one line he goes back. He lies a lot. He lies. Look, that's true, but that doesn't hit as hard as 88 criminal charges. He's a convicted felon, right? That doesn't hit as hard as he wants to suspend the Constitution. Oh, God. Look, it'll be very interesting to see. Joe Biden's brain doesn't work anymore. It'll be interesting to see. If he fucking stays in, which is a nightmare to consider, but if he stays in, is it going to be the case that, again, Trump is overvalued in the polls by 8 percentage points on average, and Sleepy Joe is going to beat him with his brain tied behind his back just because people fucking hate this guy? It's possible. It's absolutely possible. People are terrified of Project 2025, all their anti-abortion stuff. People are terrified of that. People are terrified of the guy who wants to do the unitary executive theory and appoint everybody in his government, fire all the bureaucrats, bring in loyalists to him, have no brakes in the car, invoke the Insurrection Act, go full authoritarian. People are terrified of his extremism. Trump is viewed as an extremist. That's why he's underperformed in every election since 2016. And that's why the Republicans have gotten their asses handed to them time and time again. Is it possible a Democrat with literal brain problems could still beat Trump in that scenario? Look, I don't want to find out. I want a different Democratic candidate. I don't want to find this out. But it's possible. And every time you read posts like this from Trump, you understand why, hey, he's winning in the polls right now, but he's not like pulling away yet. It's still, Nate Silver has it 70-30, Biden with a 30% chance of victory. And it's stuff like this that keeps it relatively close. It's stuff like this right here. You're going to blame him for all your fucking fraud that you've done going back to the 1980s, you absolute psychopath? For once in your life, take responsibility. He never would he ever do that. Ever. And that's like one of the worst qualities to have as a leader. One of the worst. No responsibility ever. All right, so there you go. Apparently it's Joe Biden's to blame for Trump raping E. Jean Carroll and then defaming her after the fact, and Biden's to blame for Trump committing tax fraud and insurance fraud and 88 different kinds of fraud. This is where we are now. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.